The Backrooms. You've been here before. Level 255, Death Factory. If you're not careful and you look too deep into where your food comes from, you'll end up with peculiar answers. Survival difficulty, Class 2, Environmental hazards, secure, harmless entity. Description: the entirety of what I'll be calling Level 255 is a self-functioning labyrinth of multiple identical concrete structures composed of equally similar rooms and spaces within. The layout of these equally spaced lots resembles a vintage brick factory in an L shape, with the remainder of the space containing an unused parking lot. Yet again, I must remind you all that every single plot in this level is identical to the other. I could walk for miles and get lost in the grid maze of these factories, each one being almost 500,000 square feet in total. I'm really hesitant to go directly into detail on everything, but this is a research doc. Guess I just have to. Exteriors. I don't know why I'm restating this, but every single one of these factories is similar, so you can use this as a reference to all the other buildings here. The primary building material used for the structure, copied throughout level 255's infinite plane, is brick, or concrete. There is an addition of 3 smokestacks that consistently billow smoke. I'll get to this, don't worry, Lee. And since all these buildings seemingly copy each other's operations, the air is clouded in a constant haze of coal-fired smog. I highly recommend bringing a respirator, unless you want to be coughing up smog all the time. Aside from the brick smokestacks, you could probably catch glimpses of the flat metal roofs topping each factory. A fine layer of soot remains on practically everything, occasionally sliding off of the roofs in sheets like packed snow. Walking across the narrow roads separating each factory makes it feel like walking through a snowstorm at times. You could follow your footprints in the layers of dust, but they easily get coated over within a few hours. Just be mindful of where you're going. Even though the whole place is practically abandoned, it often simulates semi-trucks with their trailers, set up in the lot portions of the factories. It looks as though they would be ready to pick up goods, if not for the fact that absolutely no one seems to operate the place or the trucks. However, these also collect soot, just like everything else does. Unfortunately for all you scavenger types, these trucks are totally empty. Not even their trailers have anything inside. Interiors. Now we can get to the real meat and potatoes of this discovery. You can access these factories through the main doors or loading bays, in which some of the trucks are almost docked to. If you either shimmy by the container or enter through the main doors, you'll probably be met with even more smog and the faint industrial lights caged high along the walls. There's always one long stretching hall, a few rooms for staff breaks and engineers, and one massive factory floor, which takes up most of the building's space. Everything lacks ventilation, so the buildup of soot and the overwhelming smell of burning coal and grilled meat becomes overwhelming. Most of the rooms lack any interesting features, aside from tables, chairs, lockers, or maybe the massive network of pipes for maintenance. There's always a stairwell that goes up and down, too, up to the catwalks above the factory, and down to lower basement levels where the massive network of factories all interlink. The source of all the awful smoke becomes clear when you check the factory floor itself. Meters and meters of conveyors and different processes, all carrying up, cooking, cutting, and attempting to package cuts of meat brought along on hooks. Oddly, the machines tasked to sort and package this cooked meat go right into a wall, even though there clearly seems to be a longer stretch of conveyor belts. Checking the other side of the wall outside yields no results, so I can only assume the packaging machines lead to some alternative level or subspace. If you're tempted, you can grab cuts of uncooked meat right off the hooks as they rise from the basement, or on their way out from the large furnaces. Although, I will not recommend this, due to reasons I will explain shortly. Regardless, there's a reason I made the meat grinder connection in the introductory portion of this page. Those basements, the spot where all these copy and pasted factories become one, are full of a labyrinth of descending lines and catwalks, all sorting and moving meat hooks. They move with a hefty, slow, and rhythmic clunking sound like a heartbeat. Each rhythmic pause causes the lines of hanging meat to jolt and sway from the pause and momentum. The vastness of the locomotion defies all logic and physics. There's seemingly nothing I could spot which suspends most of the lines, except the rusted chains holding up the industrial system, which transports the hooks carrying meat from the abyss below. The catwalks are haphazardly suspended and held above the abyss as they descend and support one another. You'd be well off wearing a hard hat, since there's a likelihood that the transported meat and the bare hooks might strike. Often, they'll cross paths with the perpetually lowering catwalks. The whole act makes it treacherous to continue downwards without keeping a hold of the rickety handrails of the mesh catwalks. For those of you worried about the haze of soot, you'll be happy to know that at least down in this vast expanse, it doesn't permeate. At least, not as heavily as it would above. The source. Down below the expansive complex, there is, in fact, a floor. After descending what to me felt like a mile of unstable walkways above the dark void, I came across the primary source of where all this meat came from. The metal rails which the hooks moved along seemed to all exit from the floor, which entirely consisted of a pulsating, writhing sea of raw flesh. It pulses with life, its skin filled with holes where the rails vertically ascend, with some descending to dredge up various ready-made cuts of meat. I have no exact words to describe how disgusting it smells, but I'll leave that to your imagination. I'm also hesitant to say that the whole mass is living or sentient. While it does pulsate with, quote-unquote, life, and make sounds similar to a working body, I can't possibly imagine what such a creature would exist to do. No god out there is cruel enough to create such an organism with such a cruel purpose. It almost makes me fear what made it, what created the wretched abomination that spans for presumably an infinite plane. Entities. As I mentioned just a few paragraphs prior, there is a, presumably single, writhing mass of expansive flesh below the level. The depth of this mass is unknown, although large perforations ranging from 1 to 3 meters in diameter are scattered haphazardly across the mass. Attempts were made by myself and spelunking experts to descend and analyze the surface of the mass, as well as the depth of the holes where the railing for the hooks emerge from. But attempts were unsuccessful due to how unstable and uneven the surface was. Despite how hard it was to stand and remain on the flesh, brief moments were taken to gather samples and photographs. Density along the surface is uneven, with it feeling just as you'd expect walking on literal flesh to feel. The ground rises and lowers randomly, twitches, and leaves a sticky residue when you walk. Attempting to remain on the surface for long enough will cause a person's body to gradually sink in. With this process, the biomass itself will become viscous in an attempt to assimilate whatever it makes contact with. For example, we dropped a flare onto the surface before descending, and within the time we were collecting samples, approximately 8 minutes, it entirely sank into the mass. For our other tests, we made astounding discoveries. Blood and tissue samples are found to be composed of a litany of different cells from a multitude of species. Human stem cells, T cells, and other human tissue could be determined via cross-referencing and inspection. The genetic makeup of common farm animals, such as cows, pigs, goats, and sheep, could also be identified among the mix of genetics and cells in the samples. This is parallel to the types of meat brought up from within the biomass, though, despite these showing clear signs of being specific cuts and types of meat from differing species, they too reveal themselves to be composed of the same cell structure of the mass below the entire level. I've personally theorized that the immense living meat below is some kind of infinitely regenerating food source, possibly made by humans, though a direct date for the creation of structures cannot be pinpointed. I only say this because I dread to think that the Backrooms happen to make a cruel mockery of our own industrial society in the form of a creature that merely lives to feed. This almost makes me worry about where half the meat I find nowadays comes from. Could we all be unknowingly eating this thing? We don't see where those conveyors go, but at the same time, how would something so complex exist without human intervention? Why did this come to exist? Needless to say, I wouldn't recommend consuming the meat this creature produces, given the presence of human cells within it. We have yet to conduct tests on what possible diseases or bacteria could be present, but blood-borne illnesses have been detected in trace amounts in a portion of sampled tissue and cuts of meat, uncooked. Bases, outposts, and communities. Prior to my visit, there didn't appear to be any signs of human presence on the level, despite the fact that it resembles somewhere requiring people to function. It seems to run just fine on its own. Aside from that, a joint research post established by independent teams known as Slaughterhouse is in the works. As of now, there are only 3 teams functioning out of one factory space, but joint ventures from other major groups are expected to be announced. Entrances and exits. Currently, Team Slaughterhouse is working on discovering all possible entrances and exits to level 255, but a few are currently known based on my own exploration attempts. Trust me, I tried my hardest. Entrances. No clipping through level 20, Fun Zone, Revision, Boreas structure, will sometimes lead to the factory floors of this level. Riding the conveyors of level 902, Conveyor Conundrum, can bring wanderers to the factories here as well. Leaving level 480, Inconvenience Store, can take someone here, though this has only been replicated once. Exits. Getting into one of the trucks here can often take someone to level 238. Road Rage. Level 2, Abandoned Utility Halls, and Level 3, Electrical Station, can be reached frequently when someone attempts to enter rooms within the factories of this level. Closing comments. If there are any questions, comments, or concerns, I can be reached via email at ibrahim.binsalman@br.net. Otherwise, I can be reached in person at the IMBH archives on level 216, the IMBH. Cheers, Dr. Ibrahim bin Salman.